Thanks for joining us today for Tuesday Testimony. And we have Ann Bradshaw. Ann and I have been friends for 20 something years and respect her and her line of work and the things I've learned from her because it is totally a different field than how my brain works. So Ann, how about you start by telling everybody, what is your field of work? What is your profession?
Well, vocationally, I just retired after 35 years, yes, yay, in public accounting, where I specialized in tax consulting for big companies with complex business. I'm always a little bit hesitant to tell people that I'm a CPA because I can almost see the mental pictures, Shannon, that I know pop into people's heads when they hear about that's what I do. You know, the boring, nerdy type with the spreadsheet in one hand and a mechanical pencil in the other. So I spent my career trying to show the world that accountants actually have personality and really don't just sit around fiddling with Excel formulas all day long. Now, the other thing I'll tell you though is that even though my field of work is labeled CPA, there was so much more to my day-to-day than just filling out tax forms. And that's what kept me in the same field, working for the same company my entire career. I got to mentor colleagues. I got to make lots of presentations. My clients brought me complex tax problems, and I got to work with them and help them figure out. But most of all, and probably most importantly, I got the opportunity to be an instrument through which Christ worked, and I pray was honored in everything that I did.
So did you have a pocket protector?
No, I did not. Wouldn't fit in my purse.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah, and I can testify to one who got to be at your retirement party just to hear the stories of the impact that you made on people's lives, not just getting to work with numbers and help companies, but how you mentored and poured into the lives of others, which was really a sweet gift to get to hear. So we'd like to give the opportunity for you to share what school you went to. So you get to share your alma mater.
Yes, I was an Oklahoma State cowboy who hailed from Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is also where I grew up.
Man, they let you out?
They did. They let me out. It's the other orange, as they would say at OSU, the brighter orange.
The brighter orange.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're glad that Stillwater lets you, branch out into the world.
As am I.
How did you become a follower of Jesus? How did that happen for you?
Yeah. Well, as one whose grandfather was a pastor and whose dad was chairman of the deacons, it probably won't come as a surprise to hear that I don't really remember a time when I didn't know about and love Jesus. If the doors of the church were unlocked, pretty sure that we were always there. And I was about 8 years old, I think, when during a revival, I knew, in spite of the fact that I'd known Jesus forever, it was at that time during a revival when I came to know that it was time to do more than just love Jesus, but it was time to give my life to him and make a commitment to make him Lord of my life. And so, there weren't any Damascus Road bright lights. It was more just a gradual progression in my maturity that led to a commitment that will always be the most significant decision in my life.
I love that. And how did you come to choose your career? How did you become a CPA? How did you make that choice?
Well, these days you don't find many people who spent their entire career with one company. And you also don't find a lot of college graduates who actually decided on their field in high school and then stuck through it through all of college and then throughout their entire career. Wow. You just don't find very many of those kind of people. And I did all three.
Wow.
So So that was a milestone in and of itself. But growing up in Stillwater, there was a family that was very close to ours, the Harris family. And they had a daughter named Pat, who was, I think she was 7 or maybe 8 years older than me. And I admired her greatly. And I watched Pat graduate from Oklahoma State with honors in accounting to go on, and she won the gold medal for the highest CPA exam score in the state, and then went on to a very, very successful career with a large international CPA firm. Pat's life ended on this earth way too soon due to an illness, but I was so inspired by her life as a faithful believer, as a role model in business, that I wanted to follow in Pat's footsteps. So it really was in high school that I decided that I too would become a CPA and would to go to work in public accounting like Pat did.
Love that. I love the influence that a college student could make on somebody younger, because most college students don't think about the impact that younger students are watching them, family members and close friends, as, they don't see themselves necessarily as huge role models, but to see how the impact and influence she had on you really influenced your whole life trajectory because of the life that she lived. So we talked about how you came to faith and then how you got into your career. So how has being a follower of Jesus impacted who you are as a CPA?
Well, it impacted everything about my work, starting with sensing God's calling to be in a profession that is very much focused on financial success, where influences can come from all different directions, from ethics to greed, to being bigger, to competitive, to getting ahead, and the list goes on and on. And there weren't, when I got into the profession, there weren't a lot of women in the upper ranks when I started out. And so as I rose in the organization and took on various leadership roles, people very much watched how I handled all kinds of challenging situations. And I remember realizing somewhere along the way that God was giving me the platform and an environment where I would really stand out as different, not just because I was a woman, but also because I was a believer in a culture and an environment where believers didn't always speak up. And so for me, trying to live out Christ's calling in the middle of the business world was very much the influence that I would say impacted my relationship with Christ, impacted everything about what I did and still do in my field.
Yeah, I can, in the business world, I imagine in accounting, when you're with businesses and success driven and money driven, right, for companies, which is, balancing that with people driven, which is, your calling for the Lord. And once again, hearing colleagues say that, you're never too busy to stop and pray with them when it got overwhelming, right? And that, their influence that you got to have on them as they worked in this hectic world of business and finance, and in some very challenging times too. I mean, you just watching you over the 20 years and all the things politically that have influenced what happens in companies, and how y'all have had to manage that in the tax world, which you oversaw, and to lead people and to understand peace in the middle of that. That's a huge influence that you've had over the people that God gave you leadership over. So what is a time when following Jesus was hard in your profession? Because, you know, following Jesus is hard. And if we're in professions, it's going to be hard. So
Yeah.
what is a time that you look back and you're like, man, that was so hard, but I don't regret following Jesus there?
Yeah. Yeah. I can, I mentioned a minute ago about the environment that is just a part of so many businesses and other careers, out there, and how, especially in my environment, how competition is a very real and significant part for many in the business world. And in a competitive environment, it's easy to get caught up in beating the other guy and getting ahead of your peers, looking good, and having others not look so good, or out negotiating the competitor. And that's part of business, but it also can bring out attitudes and behaviors that aren't Christ-like at times. And I think the hard times to follow Christ was when, in spite of all the measurements that were part of my business, I really tried never to let that get in the way of doing the right thing and honoring Christ in every interaction and every conversation, even if that meant at times letting someone else get the glory, or sharing a win with somebody else who was a deserving contributor, or at times when it might make my numbers not as robust as they could have been. It wasn't always easy to do, especially if business was down or the pressure was increased to have a big year. But for me, it always came down to trusting in God's grace and God's provision, so that I could try always to do the right thing regardless of the earthly consequences. And I would say that those were the times that sometimes it felt the hardest, when everybody around me may have had different priorities than I did, and but trying to stay true to the course of what Christ had called me and calls us to do in our daily lives.
Yeah. And so what made it easy? Like, was there a time that it was easy to follow him, or something that made it easy to follow him in your profession?
Well, I would say there probably was not a single day that ever passed where I felt my work was easy, or I felt like I had a corner on the brilliance market. It was, and this is probably what I loved about my career, it was always a challenge to perform and serve at the highest level that we needed to be successful in business. And so for me, it was easy to follow Jesus, because I couldn't do my job without his power and his grace to help me every single day. Even on the hard days, I still believed that I was there because God put me there, and believed that he had equipped me and was equipping me with the skills I needed, and was growing me and giving me the experiences I needed. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived very long at all in the profession. And so I always was grateful when I realized and recognized that God had given me just the right experience I needed at just the right time in order to do my work and to do it well, hopefully to his glory. So that's what made it easy. I didn't have to rely on myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord
Thankfully.
for those moments.
Yeah.
Those moments we move out of the way and stop relying on ourselves, right? Which is the hardest.
Yeah,
Maybe just for
right.
me, to step aside.
Yeah.
How did you've talked a little bit about this, about how you got to minister to others. Yeah. Like, is there a certain way that you saw to do that, or you got to do that most often, or that you are just sort of just happened, or how did that happen for you, that you got to minister to others?
Yeah, I think it was St. Francis of Assisi that is credited, by some anyway, with saying that that we are to preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words, right? Famous quote that we've heard lots. And God really blessed me with the strength to preach the gospel, even, I would say, at some of the biggest, in the midst of some of the biggest career challenges I faced. I had the toughest assignment of my entire career in 2015. There was this massive new tax law related to healthcare. And my team was charged with creating a new business to help our clients implement this new law. It was high stress for all of us, for our clients, a ton of risk for our clients if we
People
messed
who
up.
knew you.
That's right. Yeah, you can attest to that probably. It was high stress, and somehow though, in the midst of that storm, and with a lot of prayer and counsel by friends like you, Shannon, and others, I'm sure, in the midst of that storm, God gave me the peace and a wisdom and a calm to lead through it all. I remember that during the storm and in those years that followed, I was asked time and time again how it was that I managed to be so calm during all of that, during client demands and the extraordinarily stressful decision making that we had to do, and we went through in those days. And over again, I was able to speak not of my own power, but about God's power to work in the midst of that storm. I often shared the story of Jehoshaphat with friends that how, when the army was approaching and he looked to the Lord and prayed, Lord, I don't know what to do, but my eyes are on you. And that is honest to goodness how I got through that very difficult situation. And God blessed me because people were going through that with me and saw how he was working, and hopefully through me he brought peace and calm to others. And God, like I said, he not only gave me the peace to deal with the storm, but he also gave me the words to use when given the opportunity to share of his power and his love. And he opened the door to conversation and with my friends and colleagues in those days. And so that for me is one of the clearest examples of how God just opened so many doors, not only to share, but also got me through what, again, in 35 years was perhaps the most challenging assignment I ever had walked through.
So we've talked a lot about your career, but you followed Jesus from an early age.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be college students who are watching this.
Yeah.
What are some things that you did as a follower of Jesus in college that helped you? We never just live this life and then arrive, right? And
Sure.
It's like
Sure.
Christian or whatever.
Yeah.
But what are some things that you did that helped build that foundation for you to live out your faith in your career that you did in college?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I stayed plugged in to my local church, and I mean that would be by far the one of the very important things. College for me was a time when I was out of the nest for the first time, like so many college students, and I had grown up in a pretty sheltered environment. Most who knew me and still know me would say that I was pretty naive, perhaps bordering on cluelessness when it came to a lot of worldly experiences and enticements and temptations and all that. I had friends that I had seen who kind of went crazy with the newfound freedoms of college life, and I watched that and decided for myself that I wasn't gonna step out on that slippery slope, Lord willing. And so one of the things that I did, and looking back, I don't know if it was intentional or it's just the way God worked in my life, but I made myself accountable to my parents and to some close friends to kind of help me along the way. And what it looked like was, I shared occasional meals with my parents, even though I wasn't living at home. We still stayed in communication. I've spent time with friends who were like-minded and serious, like I was, about getting the most out of their college experience, which, that wasn't just studying all the time. It was clean, fun, hard work, studious believers who just wanted to try and stay on the path. I got myself involved in activities, wholesome ones, by the way, that, just kept me active and accountable and visible. When we stay visible, then it helped me and still helps me to stay accountable. And I try to just never let myself get into situations that could have opened the door for bad decisions. And I think the accountability and the visibility is what helped me with that. And every one of those fences, if you will, carried on into my life after college. And I will always be grateful for the way God used those disciplines, even in college, to grow me, to fill my life with good people who helped me to continue to grow, who held me accountable and helped keep me on, or at least near the path that helped me keep looking to Him. And so those were all the things that worked for me, and I hope would work for others as well.
Oh, those are really, really helpful, accountability. So, what advice, wisdom would you give to college students who are, pursuing, they're beginning to think maybe accounting, or those who are deep in it's like, why did I choose accounting? What was I thinking? What wisdom would you give them as you're looking at, like, you've just retired and these are, new people who are going to fill those steps of what you've gotten to accomplish in your career. So what wisdom or advice would you give to them?
Well, I'll give you my CPA advice, and then I'll give you my believer advice. From the CPA advice, I would say, and I have shared with other accounting students who have asked the same question, that first of all, to make the most of every opportunity to learn, both on campus and from mentors and leaders all around. Take advantage of the opportunity. And while I have always felt that it's critical to be very strong in your chosen technical area. For me, it was accounting, but also to give attention to consistently expanding those skills so that you'll be well-rounded. In business, being well-rounded is so important. And be a well-rounded professional, always learning and eager to grow. And I'll tell you, that desire continues even into retirement. To learn and grow, and also to listen and respect and be willing to invest in those around you. As kind of in my final years in my career, I had lots of opportunities to invest in other people and young people, to teach and mentor, and it's so fulfilling, but also so important to share that with others. And always remember to say thank you to those that have made a difference in your life and career. So that's the CPA advice, and I think the believer advice is much along the theme of everything that we've talked about, which is never ever forget that through God's grace and His equipping and His provision, He has given us everything that we need to follow Him in His will for us, and trusting that His plan and will is so much better anything than we can come up with. And so, Jeremiah 29 says it so well when it talks about the plans that He has for us are great plans. And so I think that if there's any parting advice, it would just be to keep your eyes on Christ and following His direction, and regardless of what kind of career path He takes you on, there is a place for you to be strong in your faith and preach the gospel with and without words.
Well, I love that, and thanks for your time today. The business school is right across the street from the BSN, so maybe this summer I need to enroll and learn how to do a spreadsheet.
There you go.
They'd be like, please don't. Well, I just appreciate your time and your story and how that can impact. Our stories are impactful and encouraging to each other. So that you would take the time to encourage young accountants and non-accountants, as multiple people will get to see this and learn how to be a faithful follower in whatever God calls them to. And so appreciate watching your life and your ministry in accounting as a CPA over the years. So thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Well,